Ea is known as the Sword of Rupture, and it's the most powerful weapon inside Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon. It sets the gold standard for the power and prestige of the weapons wielded by servants. But while most noble phantasms in Fate have legends woven around them, Ea remains nameless and its origins are shrouded in the mists of time. So let's shed some light on one of the most powerful weapons in Fate. Now let's start with the obvious. This thing doesn't look like a sword. Its design and structure deviate significantly from what we would traditionally call a blade. But that's because Ea predates the concept of blades. It was created before something like a sword even existed. It still has elements that are reminiscent of a sword, like a grip and a handguard, and it's about the same length as a sword. The part that doesn't look anything like a sword is the blade. Instead of a flat blade, Ea has a cylindrical drill-like design, and its edges, unlike a sharp sword, are dull. This drill is split into 3 rotating parts, each adorned with crimson cuneiform inscriptions, which is the same language as what the Epic of Gilgamesh is written in on clay tablets. That's kind of weird considering Ea existed before cuneiform was even a thing. Maybe these inscriptions were added later, or maybe I'm just looking into it a bit too much. Anyway, these segments rotate independently of each other, with the middle segment rotating clockwise and the top and bottom segments rotating counterclockwise. This rotation mechanism is reminiscent of querns, which are ancient tools used for grinding. Interestingly, the inspiration for this drill design is drawn from bedrock excavators, specifically those used in the construction of underwater tunnels. Why is that important? Dunno, but now you know. Despite its categorization as a sword, Ea's essence leans more towards that of a wand. This isn't just in terms of its physical appearance, but also in its symbolic representation. The 3 rotating segments represent the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Each segment's rotation in opposite directions symbolizes these realms' distinct yet interconnected nature. Combined, they form a holistic representation of the cosmos, encapsulating the entirety of the universe in its design. And that's just one of the many reasons why in Fate it's the embodiment of the very act of creation. You see, in ancient Mesopotamian lore, it was this sword that cleaved the formless chaos, giving birth to the distinct realms of heaven and earth. This act of division brought order to the entire cosmos. The sword is a divine construct, a creation of the gods themselves, forged during a time when deities walked the earth and shaped the world. The name Ea and the sword's abilities are believed to be references to ancient Mesopotamian and Babylonian myths. Ea in these ancient tales is the great god of earth and water, but there are other sources which suggest that the sword was simply named by Gilgamesh. Either way, the sword's name and its legend also draws parallels with the Babylonian creation myth, Enuma Elish. This connection ties the sword to the very fabric of creation, emphasizing its role in shaping the world and its status as a divine instrument of the gods. Noble phantasms are typically activated by saying their names, which, let's face it, is common in just about any anime. However, Ea's ability has its own distinct name, Enuma Elish, the star of creation that split heaven and earth. And this isn't just a name, it signifies the overloaded state under which the sword releases its maximum output. While Enuma Elish is often listed as the noble phantasm in Gilgamesh's status, it's actually the sword itself, Ea, that is the actual noble phantasm. Originally, Ea held the authority of nation building. This suggests that the sword was not just a weapon of destruction, but also a tool of creation, capable of shaping civilizations and laying the foundations for nations. The attack itself is born of the winds drawn to the revolution of Ea's 3 cylinders. As these cylinders rotate, they create a spatial severance known as the Sword of Separation. This severance compresses and intertwines layers of wind, resulting in a virtual dislocation of space-time, which is so potent that it annihilates anyone or anything that opposes it. The damage inflicted by Enuma Elish is nearly impossible to defend against. It boasts an elimination rank armor class statistic of such magnitude that only anti-purge defense can hold it off. Another way to resist it is mutual negation, achieved through a counterattack inflicting equivalent damage. But these defenses are rare and challenging to execute. Aside from that, while many have tried to defend against the attack, only few have succeeded. Archer's Row Aias can just about withstand it, but only when Gilgamesh is not using the sword's full power. Even then, Shira still sustains severe injuries. The only known defensive ability to completely shield against Enuma Elish is Avalon, where Gilgamesh, in all his might and knowledge, believed it to be impossible for any defense to withstand Enuma Elish, which should tell you all you need to know about how powerful Avalon is. But how powerful is Ea exactly? It's classified as an anti-world Noble Phantasm, but in the dub for Fate Zero, Waver refers to it as anti-universe. Don't know why. This classification implies that its power is not merely against individual entities or armies, but against the very fabric of the world itself. This makes sense because when unleashed, Ea doesn't discriminate or target. It attacks everything within its sight, obliterating it with a singular, overwhelming strike. And if you let me get super nerdy for a second, the attack power is based upon 20 times Gilgamesh's strength statistic, with a possible boost by adding his mana statistic to his strength statistic at random. The maximum output of the sword is 4000 damage, which is equal to Superior Saber's full strength Excalibur. But this number can be further increased by the amount of wealth of Noble Phantasms contained in his treasury, with more wealth providing more power. And finally, since Angelica's and Child Guild's strength is lower than Gilgamesh's, their version of Enuma Elish is weaker. Now that didn't take too long, did it? When Gilgamesh speaks of the sword's knowledge, he refers to a time before the dawn of creation, before the worlds took on the form we recognize. That's why he says that the sword knows the truth of the world it existed in. And that's why Ea is not just a weapon, it's a relic from an era when the earth was inhospitable. This primordial world was a landscape of molten lava, freezing gases, scalding heat, and bone-chilling cold. It was a time of chaos where life as we understand it could not have existed. Gilgamesh also claims that the sword is intimately tied to all the myths and legends about the underworld or the land of the dead. This connection suggests that the hellish primordial world that Ea represents is the foundation for tales of afterlife realms, places of punishment and domains of the deceased. The sword in essence is a bridge to this ancient world, a key to understanding the origins of these myths. But the memory of this primordial era, while ancient and distant, is not entirely lost. Gilgamesh believes that every living organism carries within it a genetic memory of this time, a recollection of a world before life began. However, as eons passed, this memory faded from the conscious minds of beings, becoming a repressed knowledge buried deep within their genetic code. It is no longer a tale told around fires or a legend passed down through generations. Instead, it exists as a silent, inherent memory waiting to be awakened. And thus, the true power of Ea isn't in its ability to tear the world apart, but it's in the ability to unveil this hidden memory. Those who gaze upon the sword and witness its power are granted a glimpse into this forgotten era. The sword bridges the present with a distant past and reveals the world's primordial truth. And that's why it's not just a weapon, but a key to understanding the very essence of creation. Another thing that sets it apart from other weapons is that it's unique to Gilgamesh. While many of the nameless weapons from the Gate of Babylon have been passed down through history and found their way into the hands of various wielders, Ea is the exception. This sword is intrinsically tied to Gilgamesh, making it a unique existence that only he can possess. Its design, power, and significance are such that it's deemed suitable only for a ruler, elevating Gilgamesh to a level of transcendence among servants, as if he needed more reasons to be arrogant. Ea holds a special place in Gilgamesh's vast treasury. It's his second most prized possession after Enkidu, so it's no wonder he only uses it against the most exceptional of opponents. Only those whom he deems worthy are granted the honor of facing the might of Ea. But then why did he use it against Shiro? Well, I mean, he didn't. He used it against a Grail, and it just so happened to be powerful enough to knock Shiro back. He's clear about not wanting to tarnish its legacy by using it against those he considers beneath its stature. For Gilgamesh, the sword is not just a tool, but a symbol of his power and prestige. During the 5th Holy Grail War, he acknowledges only Saber and her legendary sword Excalibur as being worthy adversaries for Ea. And in the 4th Holy Grail War, Ryder earns Gilgamesh's respect as a fitting opponent, and his Ionian Hatairoi is deemed an appropriate stage for Ea. Gilgamesh's reverence for Ea is evident in his reactions when its use is suggested inappropriately.
あの怪物を倒し得る英雄は御身しかあらせられませぬ。あれほどの再生力がある以上、奴の総体を一撃のもとに消し飛ばすしかない。それが叶うとすれば英雄を御身の乖離権を置いて他には。しで者が！我が司法たるエアをここで抜けと？わきまえよ時臣！王に対してその妄言、憤敬にも値するぞ。
The mere suggestion by Tosaka Tokiomi to employ Ea against a creature summoned by Caster infuriates him. The idea of having to unleash its power against Shiro within unlimited blade works for a second time is met with disdain and ends up leading to his downfall. And his relationship with Ea is more than just a person using a weapon. He often speaks of it with deep admiration, even going as far as to tell Archer that Ea is akin to his other half. This bond is so profound that he converses with the Noble Phantasm as if it were a person.
エアよ、寝覚めで不機嫌だろうがしばしの共演に付き合ってもらうぞ。何、退屈はさせん。
The sheer power and nature of Ea have evoked reactions from other characters in the series too. Ryder notes that its power seems to grow increasingly incomprehensible the more one witnesses it in action, and Shiro can't even comprehend its existence, and describes Ea as the only sword that does not exist in this world.
なんだあれは。読めない。あの武器だけは構造さえ全く読み取れない。
While its grandeur and lore are impressive, Ea is not just a symbolic weapon. It boasts practical combat capabilities that make it a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. In close combat, despite its design suggesting otherwise, Ea can be wielded like a traditional slashing weapon, which we see in Fate Unlimited codes, where Gilgamesh employs it with deadly precision. It can also be used as a stabbing weapon, which we see when it effortlessly pierces through Ryder's chest. And then, that brings us to when Gilgamesh and Enkidu fight in Fate Strange Fake, where the very fabric of reality is put to the test. Ea creates a void so immense that the world itself is drawn into it. But since Enkidu is Gilgamesh's equal and counterbalance, he possesses his own version of Enuma Elish, which acts as a binding force, holding the world together and preventing it from being torn apart.
原書を語る。天地は分かれ無は開闢をことほる。世界を裂くは我が怪力剣。
呼び起こすは星の息吹。人と共に歩む。僕はゆえに
星々を回す渦、天上の地獄とは創世前夜の終着よ。